The scent of barbecue and fresh-cut grass filled the air, the perfect backdrop for what was supposed to be a perfect family moment. I cradled our 2-month-old son, Leo, my heart swelling with a love so fierce it almost hurt a love I thought I shared equally with my husband, Ben. We were the picture of happiness. But beneath the canopy of oak trees and the cheerful chatter of the annual Miller family reunion, a venomous whisper was spreading. It was a poison that would soon erupt, turning our idyllic day into a public spectacle of humiliation. A moment where my own husband, in front of his entire family, would point a trembling finger at our beautiful baby and accuse me of the ultimate betrayal. He demanded a DNA test to prove his suspicions. He never imagined that the truth it revealed wouldn't destroy me, but would, instead, unearth a secret that had been rotting at the core of his own family for generations. The Miller family reunion was an institution, an unshakable pillar in the architecture of my husband Ben's life. Held every second Saturday in July at his parents' sprawling suburban home in North Carolina, it was a day of mandated merriment, of potluck salads, overly competitive lawn games, and the slow, simmering resentments that only decades of shared history can produce. For the past 5 years, I had navigated it with a practiced ease. A smile plastered on my face as I fielded questions about when Ben and I were finally going to start a family. This year was different. This year, I was no longer just Ben's wife. I was the mother of his son. I carried Leo in a soft grey sling against my chest. At just 8 weeks old, he was the undisputed star of the show. He was a beautiful baby, perfect in every way, with a shock of dark, wavy hair that defied the poker-straight blonde locks Ben and I both shared. His eyes were a deep, soulful brown, unlike my green or Ben's blue, and his skin, even in the dappled sunlight, held a warm olive tone, a stark contrast to the pale, freckled complexions of the Miller clan. I hadn't thought much of it. Genetics are a lottery, a chaotic tumble of ancestral traits. My own grandmother had darker hair in her youth, and I'd heard stories of a great-uncle with a swarthier complexion. To me, Leo was simply himself, a unique and wonderful combination of all the people who had come before us. But as the day wore on, I started to feel a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The initial cooing and congratulations began to curdle into something else, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. It was in the way Ben's Aunt Patty, a woman with a face permanently pinched in disapproval, looked from Leo to me and back again a little too long. It was in the hushed whispers that would abruptly stop the moment I approached a circle of cousins. Ben, for his part, seemed oblivious, basking in the glow of new fatherhood. He proudly paraded Leo around, accepting backslaps from his uncles and introducing his son to distant relatives whose names I could never remember. "Look at this little guy, isn't he a champ?" Ben would say, his voice booming with pride. "He's healthy, that's for sure," his Uncle Richard would reply, his eyes lingering on Leo's hair. "Got a good set of lungs on him." The first direct comment came from Ben's mother, Carol. She was a woman who wielded sweetness like a weapon, her compliments often laced with a subtle cutting edge. She cornered me by the dessert table, her smile as bright and artificial as the whipped topping on the strawberry pretzel salad. "Sarah, honey, you look wonderful. Motherhood suits you," she began, her eyes darting down to the sleeping baby on my chest. "He's just precious. So exotic looking. Where does he get that dark hair? It's almost black." I felt a prickle of unease. "Oh, I don't know," I said, forcing a light laugh. "Genetics are a funny thing, aren't they? My nana had dark hair when she was young. Carol's smile tightened. Really? I always pictured your family as being so fair. Like you. She reached out and brushed a finger against Leo's cheek. And this tan? He's going to be a heartbreaker with the girls, a little Latino lover. She said it with a laugh, but the word Latino hung in the air between us, heavy and loaded. The Millers were proud of their English and German heritage, a fact they brought up at every opportunity. They were white through and through, and they saw the world in sharply defined categories. Anything outside of their narrow experience was exotic, different, other. I pulled Leo a little closer, a protective instinct flaring in my chest. He's just got a healthy glow, Carol. I saw Ben approaching out of the corner of my eye, a plate loaded with potato salad and a burger in his hand. He'd heard the last part of our exchange. Mom, what are you talking about? He asked, his brow furrowed. Oh, nothing, sweetie, Carol chirped, turning her blinding smile on him. Just admiring my beautiful grandson. Sarah and I were just saying how he doesn't look a thing like either of you. It's so fascinating. She patted his arm and drifted away, leaving a trail of cloying perfume and discomfort in her wake. Ben looked at me, a question in his eyes. What was that about, your mum being your mum? I said, trying to dismiss it. But the seed had been planted. I could see it. For the rest of the afternoon, I watched as Ben's interactions changed. He would look at Leo, truly look at him, and I could see the wheels turning in his head. He started comparing Leo's tiny features to his own, to mine, to the old family photos, and to Mool, hanging on his parents' walls. The whispers grew louder, more brazen. I was sitting on a lawn chair feeding Leo his bottle when I overheard two of Ben's cousins, Jessica and Megan, talking just behind me. I'm just saying, it's weird, Jessica said, her voice a nasal whine. Ben and Sarah are both practically translucent. Look at the baby's skin. It's like coffee with a little bit of cream. And that hair. It's not just dark, it's curly. Maybe she has a secret, Megan whispered conspiratorially. You know the mailman, the gardener. They both giggled. My blood ran cold. My hands started to shake, and I almost dropped the bottle. I stood up abruptly, turning to face them. Their laughter died in their throats, their faces flushing with guilt. I didn't say a word. I just gave them a look that I hoped conveyed all the contempt I was feeling, then turned and walked away, my heart pounding against my ribs. I found Ben by the grill talking to his father, David. Ben was laughing at something his dad said, but the sound was hollow, forced. The easy confidence he'd had earlier in the day was gone, replaced by a tense, agitated energy. Ben, can we go home? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Leo's getting fussy. Ben looked at me, then at his dad, then back at me. Already? The party's just getting started. I'm not feeling well, I lied. I have a headache. David clapped his son on the shoulder. Don't let her drag you away, son. The women can take the baby home. You stay here and have a beer with your old man. The casual sexism was typical, but today it felt malicious. They were trying to separate us, to isolate Ben and pour more of their poison into his ear. No. Ben said, his jaw tight. No, we'll go. Let me just say goodbye to a few people. The car ride home was suffocatingly silent. The 10-minute drive felt like an eternity. Leo slept soundly in his car seat, oblivious to the storm that was brewing in the front seats. I stared out of the window, tears blurring the passing houses into streaks of color. I couldn't believe this was happening. I had given Ben a son, a beautiful, healthy boy, and his family was treating me like a criminal. Worse, Ben was letting them. We pulled into our driveway. Ben killed the engine, but neither of us moved. The silence stretched thick and suffocating. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and strained. "Sarah, we need to talk." "Talk about what, Ben?" I snapped, my control finally breaking. "About how your mother called our son a Latino lover, or how your cousins think I'm sleeping with the mailman, or how your own father tried to get you to stay and drink with him while I took our sick child home alone. What exactly do we need to talk about? About what they're all saying?" He said, his voice barely a whisper. He wouldn't look at me. He just stared straight ahead, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. "About Leo." "What about him?" I demanded, my voice rising. "That he's beautiful, that he's perfect, that he's our son." He finally turned to look at me, and what I saw in his eyes broke my heart. The love, the trust, the adoration I was so used to seeing, there was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, ugly suspicion. "Is he, Sarah?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Is he really my son?" The question hung in the air, a monstrous, obscene thing. It felt like a physical blow knocking the air from my lungs. I stared at him, speechless, my mind reeling. This wasn't my Ben. My Ben, the man I had married, the man who had held my hand and told me I was his world as I labored for 18 hours to bring our child into it, would never ask me that. But this new Ben, this stranger sitting next to me, was a product of the Miller family reunion, a man twisted by whispers and innuendo. The storm had not just gathered, it had broken, and I was standing right in the middle of it. The inside of our house, usually a sanctuary of shared dreams and comfortable routines, felt alien and hostile. The air, thick with unspoken accusations, was harder to breathe than the humid July air outside. I carried a sleeping Leo straight to his nursery, my movements stiff and robotic. Every fiber of my being wanted to scream, to rage, to throw something, but I was numb, encased in a layer of shock, so profound it felt like ice. I laid Leo in his crib, my hands trembling as I smoothed the blanket over his small body. I looked at his perfect face, the gentle curve of his lips, the dark lashes resting on his olive cheeks. My son. Our son. How could Ben even think it? How could he look at this child, a child we had planned for and prayed for, and see anything but a reflection of our love? I heard Ben come into the house, the heavy thud of his footsteps on the hardwood floor, echoing the dread in my heart. I braced myself. He appeared in the doorway of the nursery, leaning against the frame. He looked exhausted, his face pale and drawn. The anger I had seen in the car had been replaced by a desperate, pleading confusion. "Sarah," he started, his voice soft. I didn't mean it like that." "How exactly did you mean it, Ben?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. I didn't turn to look at him. I kept my eyes fixed on Leo. When you ask your wife if your son is really yours, there aren't many ways to interpret it. It's just, everyone was talking. My mom, Aunt Patty, even my dad pulled me aside. They were putting things in my head. "And you let them?" I spun around to face him, my voice finally cracking through the numbness sharp with betrayal. "You let those bitter, prejudiced people poison your mind against me, against your own son. I've spent 5 years smiling through your aunt's backhanded compliments and your mother's passive-aggressive digs. I held my tongue when they questioned our finances, our decision to move to this city the way I decorated our house. But this Ben, this is different. They are questioning my fidelity, my character, the very legitimacy of our child. And you stood there and let them. What was I supposed to do? He yelled back, his own frustration boiling over. Start a fist fight with my 70-year-old uncle, tell my mother she's a horrible person in the middle of her own party. Yes, I screamed, the sound raw and torn from my throat. You were supposed to defend me. You were supposed to tell them to shut their ignorant mouths. You were supposed to be my husband. Tears were streaming down my face now, hot and angry. Ben took a step towards me, his hands outstretched. Shh, you'll wake the baby. Don't you dare, I hissed, backing away from him. Don't you dare use our son to silence me right now. You're the one who brought him into this ugly mess. He dropped his hands, looking defeated. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Sarah. It's just, he doesn't look like me. He doesn't look like you. I look at him and you what? I pressed my heart, shattering into a million tiny pieces. You see someone else. Who do you see, Ben? Tell me. Do you have a name? A face? Have you been picturing me in bed with some imaginary dark-haired stranger? The cruelty of my own words hung in the air, but I couldn't stop them. I wanted to hurt him the way he had hurt me. I wanted him to feel even a fraction of the humiliation and violation I felt. No. Of course not, he said, his voice anguished. I see you. I see us. But then I hear their voices, and I get confused. I need to be sure. Sure of what? That I haven't cheated on you. My voice was laced with disbelief. We've been together for 8 years, Ben. Married for 5. I have never, not for 1 second, been unfaithful to you. I love you. Or at least I loved the man I thought you were. The weight of that last sentence settled over us. Ben flinched, as if I had physically struck him. The fight went out of him, replaced by a hollow-eyed despair. He sank onto the rocking chair in the corner of the room, burying his face in his hands. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. For a moment, a flicker of my old love for him sparked in my chest. I saw the man I had married lost and in pain. But it was quickly extinguished by the cold reality of his betrayal. He wasn't just in pain. He was the cause of it. I'm sleeping in the guest room, I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. I walked out of the nursery, closing the door softly behind me, leaving him alone with his doubt and our sleeping son. The next few days were a living hell. We moved through our home like ghosts, communicating only in clipped necessary sentences about Leo's feeding schedule or diaper changes. The silence was a constant screaming presence. Every time I looked at Ben, I felt a fresh wave of hurt and anger. Every time he looked at me, I saw a mixture of guilt and that same lingering suspicion. It was a cancer, and it was eating our marriage alive from the inside out. My sister Chloe called on the 3rd day. She was 3 years older, fiercely protective, and had the no-nonsense attitude I desperately needed. Okay, I just got off the phone with Mum, Chloe said, skipping the pleasantries. She told me what happened at the reunion. Are you okay? The dam broke. I collapsed onto my bed, the phone pressed to my ear, and sobbed out the whole sordid story. I told her about Carol's comments, the cousin's whispers, and finally Ben's gut-wrenching question in the car. Chloe listened patiently, punctuating my story with furious sputtering. That woman, she seethed, referring to Carol. I swear she's Medusa in a twin set, and Ben, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to drive over there and actually murder him." "Don't," I said, a watery, miserable laugh escaping me. "I need him alive to pay the mortgage." "Fine," she huffed. "But he's on thin ice. So what are you going to do?" "I don't know." I confessed, my voice thick with tears. "I feel like my life has just imploded. I look at him and I don't know who he is anymore. How do we come back from this? Chloe, how can he ever trust me again? More importantly, how can I ever forgive him for not trusting me in the first place?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her thinking. "You prove him wrong," she said, finally, her voice firm and clear. "You take away his doubt. You take away all their ammunition. You get a DNA test." I recoiled from the suggestion. "No, absolutely not. My child is not a science experiment. I will not subject my son and myself to that kind of humiliation just to appease Ben's baseless paranoia. My word should be enough." "In a perfect world, yes," Chloe said gently. "But you're not in a perfect world, Sarah. You're in a world where your husband is being manipulated by his family of racist morons. You can say I told you so until you're blue in the face, but that doubt, it's going to linger. It'll be the ghost in your marriage forever. Every time you and Ben have a fight, every time Leo does something that they deem different, it's going to come back up. You need to kill it. For good. Not for Ben's sake. Not for his family's. For yours. And for Leo's." I hated that she was right. I hated the idea of it, the cold, clinical nature of proving my own fidelity. It felt like a surrender, a concession that his doubt had merit. But Chloe was right. The whispers wouldn't stop. Ben's weakness had been exposed, and his family would continue to exploit it. The only way to shut them up permanently was with cold, hard scientific fact. That evening I approached Ben. He was on the couch staring blankly at a muted television screen. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "I've been thinking," I said, standing in the doorway to the living room. He looked up, his eyes hopeful. "I'm going to schedule a DNA test." The hope in his eyes died, replaced by a deep, shuddering shame. He looked down at his hands. "Sarah, no. You don't have to do that. I was wrong. I was an idiot. I believe you." "Do you, Ben?" I asked, my voice devoid of warmth. "Do you really? Or will a part of you always wonder? Will you look at him in 10 years and see the face of a stranger? Will you let your mother's poison drip into your ear for the rest of our lives?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. "We'll do a legal paternity test." I continued, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "At a certified clinic. No home kits that can be questioned or tampered with. We'll get a legally binding result. And when it comes back and says you're his father, you are going to take that piece of paper to your mother and father and the rest of your charming family. You are going to make them look at it, and you are going to demand an apology, not just to me, but to your son, for ever questioning his place in this world. And if you can't do that, then you and I have nothing left to talk about." Ben slowly lifted his head, his face a mask of misery and guilt. "Okay," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Okay, Sarah. I'll do it." The decision was made. There was no relief, no sense of victory, just a profound, soul-crushing sadness. Our marriage was now hanging by the thread of a laboratory report. We had reached a point of no return. Whatever the paper said, the trust we once had was already gone, and I had no idea if we could ever find our way back to it. The clinic was a sterile, impersonal place in a medical park on the other side of town. It smelled of rubbing alcohol and anxiety. The walls were painted a placid, unoffensive beige, a color that did nothing to soothe the frantic jackhammer rhythm of my heart. We sat in the waiting room, 3 feet of empty space between us, on the vinyl couch, a chasm of resentment and hurt. Ben stared at the floor, his hands clasped so tightly between his knees that his knuckles were white. I held Leo, who was blissfully unaware, gurgling and smiling at the fluorescent lights above. I felt the eyes of the receptionist on us, the other people in the waiting room. They were probably here for custody battles, child support disputes, the messy, painful detritus of broken relationships. And now we were one of them. A statistic. A family fractured by doubt. The shame was a physical weight pressing down on my chest and making it hard to breathe. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller," a technician called out. Her voice was professionally cheerful. We followed her down a hallway to a small room. The process was brutally simple, almost anticlimactic. She explained the procedure, her words clear and practiced. She would take a buccal swab, a long Q-tip rubbed on the inside of the cheek, from me, from Ben, and from Leo. The samples would be sealed, labeled, and sent to the lab. The results would be back in 7 to 10 business days. The technician swabbed my cheek first. It was a strange, invasive feeling, but I remained stoic. Then it was Ben's turn. He flinched when the swab touched his mouth, his eyes glistening with unshed tears of shame. Finally, she approached Leo. I held his head gently as she quickly and expertly swabbed his tiny mouth. He barely fussed, more curious than upset. And that was it. 15 minutes and a few $100, and the fate of our family was sealed in 3 small plastic vials. The drive home was just as silent as the drive from the reunion, but the silence had a different quality now. It was a waiting silence, a purgatory. We had done the unthinkable, and now all we could do was wait for the verdict. Those 10 days were the longest of my life. We continued our ghostly cohabitation. I threw myself into caring for Leo with a ferocious intensity. His baths, his feedings, his naps. They were my only anchor in a sea of uncertainty. He was the only thing that felt real, the only person I could look at without feeling a complicated knot of anger and sorrow. Ben, on the other hand, seemed to be disintegrating. He lost weight. Dark circles formed under his eyes. He would try to talk to me to breach the wall I had built around myself. "I've been reading about genetics," he said one evening, his voice tentative. He was standing in the kitchen while I sterilized bottles. "Recessive genes and things. It's actually pretty interesting. Your grandmother's hair, like you said. That could be it?" I didn't respond. I just continued my work, my back to him. His research felt like too little too late. He should have trusted me, not a Wikipedia article. His attempts at reconciliation felt hollow, like a desperate bid to undo the damage he had already done. The trust he had shattered couldn't be glued back together with a few half-hearted facts about dominant alleles. My sister Chloe was my lifeline. She called every day. "Any news?" she'd ask. "Nothing yet," I'd reply. "How are you holding up?" "I feel like I'm holding my breath," I told her honestly. "I know what the result will be, of course, but I'm terrified. I'm terrified of what comes after. What if he's relieved? What if he just says, 'Oh, okay, sorry,' and expects us to go back to normal? I don't think I can do that." "You don't have to," she said, her voice firm. "This isn't just about him being the father. This is about the accusation. The result doesn't erase that. It just gives you the power. Remember that, Sra. You hold all the cards now." The email arrived on the 8th business day. It was just after 10 a.m. Leo was napping and the house was quiet. My phone buzzed on the counter. The sender was Integrated Genetics Laboratory. The subject line was, "Your case results are available." My breath caught in my throat. I stared at the phone, my heart pounding. Ben was at work. I could open it now alone, or I could wait for him. Part of me, the vengeful, wounded part, wanted to see it first to hold the knowledge over him. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the man I married, knew this was something we had to face together. He had started this. He needed to be there for the end of it. I texted him. 3 simple words. "It's here." His reply was instantaneous. "I'm coming home." He must have broken every speed limit because he was walking through the door less than 15 minutes later. He looked pale, his hands trembling. He didn't say a word, just walked over to where I was standing by the kitchen counter, my phone lying face down between us. "Let's just do it," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. I nodded. I couldn't speak. I picked up the phone, my thumb hovering over the screen. I took a deep breath and opened the email. A link directed us to a secure portal. I logged in. The page loaded and a PDF document appeared on the screen. Paternity Test Report was written in stark, bold letters at the top. My eyes scanned the page past the case numbers and the legal jargon, searching for the only thing that mattered. And then I saw it in a table at the bottom of the page. Under the column, Alleged Father Benjamin Miller, and beside the row, Probability of Paternity, was the number that would define the rest of our lives. 99.99%. A wave of something dizzying and complex washed over me. It wasn't relief, not yet. It was a bitter, vindictive triumph. I wanted to scream, "I told you so." I wanted to wave the phone in his face. But when I looked at Ben, the triumphant feeling withered and died. He was staring at the screen, his face ashen. A single tear tracked its way down his cheek, then another. A gut-wrenching sob escaped him, a sound of such profound self-loathing that it shocked me. He sank to his knees on our kitchen floor, his body shaking with the force of his guilt. "Oh God, Sarah." He choked out, his voice muffled by his hands. "What have I done? I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I stood there, frozen, the phone still in my hand. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the ultimate vindication. But seeing him so completely broken didn't bring me the satisfaction I had expected. It just felt tragic. Our marriage was on its knees, right there with him. "There's more," I said, my voice strangely flat. My eyes had drifted past the paternity result to a smaller section below it, something I hadn't noticed at first. It was an add-on, a basic ancestral DNA marker analysis that the lab included as part of their comprehensive package. It was something we hadn't even asked for. "What?" Ben asked, looking up, his face streaked with tears. I turned the phone screen towards him. "Look." It was a simple pie chart breaking down Leo's genetic ancestry. The majority, as expected, was Northern European, English, German, Scandinavian, the heritage of both my family and supposedly the Millers. But there was another slice, a significant one, representing 24% of his DNA. The label next to it read, Iberian Peninsula and North Africa. We stared at it, utterly bewildered. Spanish, Portuguese, Moroccan, Algerian. My family had been meticulously traced back to England and Ireland. There was nothing like that in my ancestry. Ben's face went from guilt to utter confusion. I don't understand, he stammered. Where did that come from? The question hung in the air, a new and unexpected mystery. The DNA test had answered the one question that had torn us apart only to pose another, far more complicated one. The proof of Ben's paternity was undeniable, but the proof of his family's history, it seemed, was not what he thought it was. The test had proven him wrong about me, but it was about to prove him and his entire family wrong about themselves. The secret of our son's skin color wasn't in my betrayal. It was hidden somewhere in his own blood. The stark white of the kitchen floor felt cold and unforgiving against Ben's knees. The number on the phone screen, 99.999%, pulsated in the silent room, a definitive explosive truth. It was a vindication so total it left no room for argument, and it had brought my husband to his knees in a paroxysm of guilt. The sound of his sobs was ragged and ugly, the sound of a man's soul cracking apart. He had gambled our entire life together on a suspicion born of whispers and prejudice, and he had lost in the most spectacular way possible. I stood over him, my body rigid, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. This was the moment I had replayed in my mind 1,000 times during the last 10 days. The moment of my triumph. But the satisfaction I had craved was absent, replaced by a vast, empty ache. Seeing him so utterly shattered didn't heal the wound he had inflicted. It only illuminated the depth of the chasm that now lay between us. "There's more," I said, my voice sounding distant and unfamiliar to my own ears. My gaze had drifted below the triumphant certainty of the paternity result to the unexpected colorful pie chart that followed. It was an add-on, a basic ancestral analysis. We hadn't requested a bonus feature that was about to become the main event. Ben looked up, his face blotchy and ravaged by tears. What more could there be? I crouched down, not to comfort him, but to show him the screen, my movements precise and deliberate. "This," I said. He squinted his tear-filled eyes, struggling to focus. He saw the largest slice of the chart labeled Northern European and nodded numbly. But then his eyes found the other segment. It was a substantial piece of the whole, a bold sliver of orange, representing nearly a quarter of our son's genetic makeup. The label beside it was unequivocal: Iberian Peninsula and North Africa. The sobs caught in his throat. Confusion chased the guilt from his face. "What Iberian?" "Spain, Morocco," he stammered, wiping at his eyes with the back of his hand. That's impossible. We don't have that. My family is German and English. Yours is Irish and English. This has to be from your side. Maybe there was a sailor or something, a great-great-uncle you never knew about." A glacial fury, sharp and dangerous, sliced through my emotional numbness. I stood up abruptly, looking down at him with a contempt I didn't bother to conceal. "Don't you dare," I said, my voice a low, lethal whisper. "Don't you dare try to deflect this onto my family. Not now. You have interrogated my integrity, my fidelity, my history. You have lost the right to question anything about me or where I come from. This is not my secret, Ben. This is yours." He flinched as if I had struck him. He slowly, painfully got to his feet, leaning against the counter for support. He stared at the phone, then at his own hands, then back at the phone. The wheels were turning, connecting the dots he had so violently refused to see before. The dark hair, the olive skin, the comments from his mother, the DNA result. It was a constellation of facts, and they all pointed in one direction: home. My mom. He breathed the realization dawning with sickening force. When she called him a Latino lover, it wasn't just a random racist comment. She saw something. She recognized something. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a new kind of horror, one that went beyond his own actions. "I have to talk to them," he said, his voice gaining a sliver of resolve. "I have to ask them." I gave a short, bitter laugh. "Ask them, Ben, you're past asking. You don't go to them with questions. You go to them with proof. You go with this." I held up the phone, the screen still glowing with the vibrant, inconvenient truth of our son's heritage. The decision hung in the air, solidifying the new reality of our marriage. The immediate crisis of paternity was over, but the war for truth had just begun. For the next 2 days, Ben moved with a grim, unfamiliar determination. The broken, sobbing man on the kitchen floor was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. Someone quiet, coiled, and radiating a cold fury that mirrored my own. He barely spoke, but I saw him on his laptop late into the night, not reading about recessive genes anymore, but scrolling through articles on Spanish immigration to the United States historical census records and the complex history of cultural assimilation and shame. When he finally picked up the phone to call his parents, his voice was devoid of its usual warmth. I stood in the hallway listening. "Mum," he said, cutting her off as she began to launch into a series of cheerful, probing questions. "We need to come over. We need to talk to you and Dad about something." I could hear the faint, tinny sound of Carol's voice trying to pry. "Is everything okay, sweetie? Is it Leo?" "You sound so serious." "We're fine," Ben said, his tone flat, leaving no room for argument. "We will be there on Sunday at 2. We have something to show you." He hung up before she could respond. He looked at me, his jaw set. "You don't have to come," he said. "This is my mess to clean up." "Oh, I'm coming," I replied, my voice hard. "I'm not coming to support you, Ben. I'm not coming to hold your hand. I'm coming to watch. I earned a front row seat to this. I need to see their faces when the lie they built their whole world on finally burns to the ground." Sunday arrived cloaked in a heavy, ominous silence. We drove to his parents' house the same route we'd taken 2 weeks ago for the reunion. But where that drive had been filled with my happy anticipation, this one was a funereal procession. I sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, while Ben drove with a white, knuckled grip on the wheel. In the back, Leo gurgled happily in his car seat, a beautiful, innocent vessel of a history he did not yet understand. He was our evidence, our truth-teller. The house with its perfectly manicured lawn and American flag flying proudly looked exactly the same. But it felt different. It felt like a stage set for a tragedy. Carol opened the door before we even rang the bell, her face arranged in a mask of worried concern that was so transparent it was insulting. "Ben, Sarah, come in, she chirped. "You had me so worried with that phone call." David was in the formal living room, rising from his armchair. This was the room for bad news and serious discussions, a museum of uncomfortable furniture and dusty family heirlooms. We sat on the stiff, floral-patterned sofa opposite them, a polished coffee table serving as the no-man's land between us. Ben, wasting no time on pleasantries, placed a folder on the table. Inside were pristine color printouts of the lab results. "We got the DNA test results," he said simply. Carol's hand fluttered to her chest. She picked up the top page. David leaned over her shoulder. I watched them, my focus absolute, cataloguing every flicker of emotion. I saw their eyes find the 99.99% confirmation. David grunted a sound of affirmation and leaned back, satisfied. Carol's painted-on smile became brittle. "Well, thank heavens," she said, her voice dripping with false relief as she placed the paper down. Of course, we never truly doubted Sweetie. It was just a bit of silly family chatter at the reunion. You know how your Aunt Patty gets after a glass of wine? I'm so sorry you and Sarah took it all so seriously and went to this extreme. David nodded in agreement. That's right. A storm in a teacup. We're sorry you were upset, Sarah. But this is a bit dramatic, don't you think? The condescension, the complete refusal to accept any real responsibility was breathtaking. They were trying to sweep it away, to pat us on the head and send us on our way, the unpleasantness neatly resolved. The rage I had been carefully controlling threatened to boil over. But before I could speak, Ben leaned forward, his eyes locked on his parents. We didn't do it because we were upset, he said, his voice dangerously calm. We did it to find the truth, and you haven't seen the whole truth yet. He slid the second page across the table, the ancestry chart. Look at the rest of it. They leaned in again, irritated but curious. I watched Carol's face as she read the words, Iberian Peninsula and North Africa. The color drained from her cheeks. Her manicured hand began to tremble. The bright, confident matriarch seemed to shrink before my very eyes. David snatched the paper from her. His face flushed a deep, angry red as he read the label. Iberian Peninsula, he boomed, his voice full of derision as he threw the paper down. What in God's name is this garbage? This is a mistake. It's a scam. We are Millers. We are descended from good, hard-working German and English stock. Protestant. My great-grandfather came from Hamburg, and his father before him. There is no Spanish blood in this family. He was shouting now, his identity so deeply threatened that his only recourse was rage. But his wife's silence was more damning than any argument. She was staring at the floral pattern on the carpet, her entire body trembling. This was my moment. I leaned forward, my voice low and sharp, cutting through David's blustering. I spoke directly to Carol. The irony is just breathtaking, isn't it? I began feeling a cruel sense of satisfaction as her head snapped up, her eyes wide with panic. You, Carol, you were so certain, so quick to point the finger at me. You looked at my son, your grandson, and saw something other, something exotic. You used the beautiful, unique color of his skin and hair as a weapon to convince your son that his wife was a whore. And all this time, the reason he looks the way he does, the secret to his appearance, it wasn't hidden in my bed. It was hidden in your bloodline. It was your secret all along. A strangled sob broke from Carol's throat. It was the sound of a lifetime of carefully constructed lies collapsing all at once. David, please, she whispered, turning to her husband, her eyes pleading. Carol, what is she talking about? He demanded, his anger now laced with confusion. Tell me this is nonsense. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face, washing away her carefully applied makeup. I can't, she choked out. It's true. She began to speak the words, tumbling out in a torrent of confession that had been dammed up for over 60 years. It was my grandmother, Evelyn. We were always told her family was from Cornwall, but that was a lie. Her father was English, yes, but her mother, my great-grandmother, her name was Sophia. She paused, taking a shuddering breath. Sophia was from Andalusia, in the south of Spain. She came here in the 1910s with her brother to work on farms in California. She was beautiful, but she was poor Catholic and had skin, as my mother used to say, the color of a walnut. She met my great-grandfather, whose family owned the farm. It was a terrible scandal. They ran away and got married. They moved across the country to escape the shame. They changed their name. Sophia became Sophie. They erased every trace of Spain from their lives. My grandmother Evelyn spent her entire life terrified of her heritage of the dark blood, she called it. She was so ashamed. The story filled the sterile room with a profound human sadness, a story of secrets and survival, of a love that defied prejudice, and of a shame so deep it had been passed down like a cursed heirloom. My mother told me the story once. Carol wept, looking at me with eyes that were a bottomless well of guilt. She warned me it could resurface after generations, that a baby could be born with the Spanish look. When I saw Leo, it was my first thought. The old shame, my mother's voice in my head. It all came rushing back, and it was easier. God forgive me. It was so much easier to believe you had been unfaithful, Sarah, than to believe our family's dirty little secret was finally out in the open. She dissolved into incoherent sobs. David sat in his armchair, utterly silent, his face a grey mask of shock. The proud patriarch, the keeper of the Miller name, had just learned his identity was a fiction. The foundation of his life, his pride, his prejudice, had been built on a lie. Ben stared at his mother, and for the first time I saw not just anger, but a deep, pitying sorrow in his eyes. "So you let me do it," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of the betrayal. "You let me destroy my marriage. You let me accuse my wife of the most vile thing imaginable. You were willing to sacrifice my family, all to protect a secret that was rooted in nothing but bigotry and fear." Carol had no answer. There was nothing left to say. We stood up and left them there adrift in the wreckage of their own history. The drive home was a study in silence, but it was a new kind of silence. It was the quiet of aftermath, of processing a truth so seismic it had permanently altered the landscape of our lives. When we walked back into our own home, it felt like a sanctuary. Later that evening, after I had put Leo to bed, I stood over his crib, watching his chest rise and fall in the soft glow of the nightlight, his dark, wavy hair, his beautiful olive skin. They were no longer points of contention. They were his legacy. They were the story of Sophia, his brave great-great-grandmother. Ben came to stand beside me, his presence tentative. "I know sorry is a meaningless word right now," he whispered, his voice thick with unshed tears. "It doesn't fix what I did. But seeing my mother today, I understand now. That prejudice, that fear of anyone different, it was fed to me my whole life in little poisonous doses. And when I was tested, I failed. I failed you, and I failed him." He reached out, not to touch me, but to gently rest his hand on the edge of the crib. "He will never be ashamed." Ben vowed, his voice gaining a strength I hadn't heard before. "He will know about Sophia. He will know that he is English and Irish and German and Spanish. He will know that his heritage is something to be proud of, all of it. I will spend the rest of my life making sure he knows that, and making sure I am a man worthy of being his father." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the profound tectonic shift within him. The man who had crumbled in the face of his family's bigotry was gone. In his place was a man humbled by the truth and determined to be better. Forgiveness was still a distant country I wasn't sure I could reach. The trust between us was a ruin. But standing there watching my husband look at our son with a love that was finally unconditional, a love mixed with a newfound reverence for the very history that had almost torn us apart, I felt something shift within me. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. but it was a flicker of something I thought had been extinguished forever. It was hope. Our story is a testament to how quickly trust can be shattered and how deeply prejudice can be hidden even within the people we love the most. The DNA test that Ben demanded, an act born of suspicion that was meant to tear our marriage apart, ended up doing the opposite. It forced us to look at the foundations of his family and confront a painful history we never knew existed. It redefined not just our present, but our past. The journey to healing is not over. Rebuilding the trust he broke is a daily conscious effort. But we are fighting. We're in counseling, learning to communicate and dismantle the biases he inherited. We are fighting for our love, for our beautiful son Leo, and for a future that honors every part of his rich heritage, free from the secrets and shame of the past. It's a reminder that the truth, no matter how difficult, is always better than a comfortable lie. If our journey resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up to show your support. Don't forget to share it with someone who understands that family is always more complicated than it seems, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories about overcoming the unexpected. Thank you for listening. The air in the grand ballroom was worth more than a city block thick with perfume and power. Josie Turner stood 7 months pregnant as her husband's mistress, Zara Vance, whispered poison in her ear. "He's just waiting for you to drop the inconvenience so he can be with me," Zara hissed her red nails, gesturing towards Josie's belly. But Zara made one fatal mistake. She thought the fight was over the man. She had no idea Josie was about to drag her entire world into the light, and it wasn't the husband who would save the day. The penthouse on Park Avenue was less a home and more a museum of Damien Turner's success. It was all glass, steel, and cold imported Italian marble that seemed to leach the warmth from Josie's bare feet, even in August. At 7 months pregnant, Josie felt like a ghost haunting its own exquisite prison. The baby, a boy they had provisionally named Arthur, was a restless kicker, a constant living reminder of a bond that felt on her husband's side to be dissolving into icy obligation. Damien Turner was not a man. He was a corporation. Turner Industries, a monolith of logistics and tech, was his true wife. Josie Hayes, a former brilliant corporate lawyer from a family of good old money, rather than filthy New World riches, had been, she now understood, a strategic merger. He had needed her poise, her pedigree, and her intelligence to smooth the rough edges of his cutthroat reputation. And for a time it had worked. Their first 2 years were a whirlwind of genuine affection, or at least a very convincing simulation of it. He'd admired her mind, her ability to spar with him over contractual loopholes and market projections. Then he'd promoted her, as he'd joked, to CEO of the Turner legacy. The moment the pregnancy was confirmed, he'd pulled away. The late nights became all-nighters. The board dinners became urgent off-site crises. The scent that clung to his bespoke suits changed. Josie wore Jo Malone's Peony and Blush Suede. The new scent was something sharper, more aggressive. Chanel No. 5, a classic but not hers. Tonight was the night that mattered most in their shared public life, the Turner Foundation Gala. It was the crowning event of New York's social calendar, a night where Damien laundered his ruthless corporate image through 9-figure charitable donations. It was to be held at the Orion Grand Ballroom, a space so opulent it made palaces look quaint. Josie was fastening the clasp of a diamond necklace, the Turner Star, a cold, heavy piece he'd gifted her, when Damien entered their dressing room. He was already in his tuxedo, a flawless, commanding presence. "Josie," he said, his voice the smooth, clipped baritone he used with his board. You're not ready. We're due on the floor in 20. I just needed a moment, she said, not turning from the mirror. He adjusted his bow tie, his eyes meeting hers in the reflection. Are you feeling unwell again? Genevieve will be there. She'll be displeased if you look pale. His mother, Genevieve Turner, was the iron matriarch who still held a significant portion of the company's voting shares. She viewed Josie's pregnancy with a grim, dynastic satisfaction. I'm fine, Damien. Just tired. He walked up behind her. His hands rested on her shoulders, but there was no warmth in them. It was a pose, something they'd done for Vogue. Good. Tonight is important. The Kestrel acquisition is in its final stages. I need everyone to see solidarity, stability. The Kestrel acquisition, Josie repeated. That was Zara Vance's project. Zara. The name tasted like ash. Zara Vance was Damien's brilliant raven-haired vice president of acquisitions. She was a shark in couture, a woman who'd clawed her way up from nothing, and who Josie knew with chilling certainty was the source of the Chanel No. 5. For the past 3 months, Josie had not been idle. She had not been weeping into cashmere pillows. She had been the lawyer she was trained to be. It started with the scent. Then a single onyx cufflink she didn't recognize in his travel bag. Then the late-night calls he took on the terrace, his voice a low, intimate murmur she hadn't heard directed at her in a year. She had used her dormant credentials to access the family's private accounts. Not the ones Damien knew about, but the real trust accounts managed by her father's ancient, dusty firm, Hayes Legal. She hadn't been looking for infidelity. She'd been preparing for a divorce. She'd been trying to secure her child's future. She had hired a private investigator, a discreet man named Sullivan, who specialized in corporate malfeasance. The photos he'd provided were all the proof she needed Damien and Zara emerging from a private suite at the Carlyle. Damien and Zara sharing a brandy at a darkened bar. Zara's hand on his thumb stroking her knuckles. But then Josie had dug deeper. Driven by a cold, precise rage, she'd started looking into Zara's star project, the $800 million Kestrel acquisition. Zara had built her reputation on it. Damien praised her killer instinct. Josie, with her retired legal mind, found the first thread in less than an hour. A shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. A bank transfer that had been split into 3 separate smaller wire payments, all routed through a subsidiary in Singapore. All personally signed off by Zara Vance. It wasn't just an affair. It was a heist. Zara wasn't just sleeping with her husband. She was robbing him. And Damien, blinded by his own ego and her flattery, was letting her do it. Is something wrong, Josie? Damien asked, his reflection's eyes narrowing. Josie forced a smile. The pain in her heart was a physical, crushing weight, but she compartmentalized it. This was a case. She was preparing for trial. No, darling, she said, turning to face him. She placed a hand on her stomach, a gesture of maternal fragility that was pure performance. Just the baby. He's kicking. He must be excited for his first gala. Damien's face softened just a fraction. The legacy was his one true blind spot. Right. Well, let's not keep our public waiting. He offered his arm. She took it, her fingers gripping the fine wool of his jacket. He felt the coldness of her diamond ring, but he didn't feel the ice in her veins. He thought she was a fragile, pregnant wife, slightly overwhelmed. He had no idea he was walking into an execution, and that she was the one holding the axe. The Orion Grand Ballroom was a sea of glittering sharks. Light from 36 crystal chandeliers fractured across billions of dollars worth of diamond stocks and political influence. Every camera flash was a small explosion capturing the smiling, predatory faces of New York's elite. Senator Davenport was laughing with Julian Rothschild. A tech billionaire Josie despised was holding court by the champagne fountain. Damien and Josie Turner made their entrance. They were the main event. He was the king, and she his pregnant queen. The narrative was perfect. The murmurs were appreciative. "Mr. Turner! Mrs. Turner!" the paparazzi yelled from the velvet rope. Damien smiled a magnetic billion-dollar gesture. He placed a proprietary hand on the small of Josie's back, just above the swell of their child. "A wonderful evening," he projected. "We're so glad you could join us in supporting the Foundation's work." Josie smiled. She let her gaze sweep the room serene and graceful. She was looking for one person. She found her near the main stage, holding a glass of champagne, surrounded by a coterie of fawning junior executives. Zara Vance. She was a vision in blood red, a custom Alexander McQueen dress that clung to her like a second skin. It was a defiant, flagrant statement. One did not wear red to a charity gala. It was seen as attention-seeking. But Zara didn't care. The dress was a challenge. It screamed, "Look at me. I am the one who matters." Her black hair was sleek, her makeup flawless. And as Damien guided Josie into the room, Zara's eyes met Josie's across the expanse of marble. There was no guilt in that gaze. There was no fear. There was only victory. A smug, predatory confidence that turned Josie's stomach to stone. "Damien, darling," a voice trilled. It was Genevieve Turner, his mother. She was a terrifying woman, sculpted by decades of social warfare, wearing a formidable sapphire necklace. "And Josie, you made it." "Of course, Genevieve," Josie said, her voice soft. "I wouldn't miss it." Genevieve grunted her eyes, scanning Josie's navy blue custom maternity gown. "Appropriate. You look... well." "Damien, I need a word," Genevieve said, already pulling him away. "The senator is waffling on that zoning ordinance." Damien gave Josie a perfunctory squeeze on the arm. "Go, mingle. I'll find you." And just like that, Josie was alone. Adrift in a room full of people who saw her as an accessory. She moved slowly, gracefully, accepting congratulations on the baby from people whose names she barely remembered. She was on autopilot, her mind a cold, whirring computer running calculations. She was halfway to the terrace, seeking a moment of quiet, when a voice stopped her. "Josie, you look absolutely glowing." Josie turned. Zara Vance stood before her, her smile as sharp as cut glass. The scent of Chanel No. 5 was overpowering. "Zara," Josie said, her voice perfectly level. "That's a very bold dress." "Thank you," Zara purred. "I believe in bold moves. They're the only ones that get results." She took a delicate sip of her champagne. "Damien loves it. He said it reminds him of a rare orchid he once saw in Singapore." It was a deliberate, targeted strike. Josie knew from Damien's credit card statements that their Singapore trip had been 2 months ago. "How lovely for you," Josie said, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach. Zara's eyes followed the movement, and her smile widened, becoming something ugly. "You really are very pregnant, aren't you? It must be exhausting, carrying all that extra weight." It just drains the life right out of you. It's a small price to pay, Josie said. Is it? Zara tilted her head. I find pregnancy so biological, so primitive. I've always believed a woman's legacy should be what she builds, she said, gesturing to the ballroom, not what she breeds. The insult was so profound, so venomous, that Josie felt the air leave her lungs. The people around them, sensing the subtle shift in energy, began to quiet down their conversations, fading as they subtly turned to watch. A confrontation between the wife and the work wife was the best kind of entertainment. That's an interesting perspective. Josie managed her mind racing. Not yet. Don't let her provoke you. Not here. Wait for the stage. It's just the truth, Zara said, stepping a little closer. Damien, he's a builder. He needs a partner who can build with him, not an incubator. You were a good lawyer, I heard. A killer. It's a shame you gave all that up to become this. She gestured to Josie from her swollen stomach to her tired eyes. You should be careful, Zara. Josie said, her voice dropping to a whisper. You're speaking very freely. Why shouldn't I? Zara laughed, a low, throaty sound. Everyone knows. Everyone in this room knows that your marriage is a shell, a holding pattern. He's just waiting for you to serve your purpose. She leaned in her perfume, a suffocating cloud. He told me you know. He said he respects your lineage. But he desires me. My mind. My ambition. My everything else. Josie stood, frozen. She could feel the eyes on her. The pitying looks, the speculative whispers. This was what Zara wanted. To prove that she held all the power. To humiliate Josie on her own territory. He's a very vigorous man, Zara continued, her voice dripping with insinuation. He has needs that a delicate woman like you clearly can't meet right now, or perhaps ever again. Josie had to end this. She turned to walk away. Oh, Josie, Zara called out, her voice suddenly loud and clear, silencing the nearest 10 tables. I almost forgot. Congratulations. Josie stopped her back to the room. She turned slowly. Zara Vance raised her champagne glass in a mock toast, a cruel, triumphant smirk on her face. I do hope it's his. The music-alive string quartet playing something by Vivaldi seemed to warp and fade. The chatter of the ballroom died. There was only the ringing in Josie's ears and the sight of Zara Vance standing there like a matador who had just delivered the killing blow. What did you say? Josie's voice was barely a breath. Zara's smirk didn't waver. She knew she had her audience. This was her stage now. She was no longer just the VP. She was the star. I just said, Zara repeated, projecting for the benefit of Senator Davenport's horrified wife. I hope the baby is Damien's. It's just, well, you two have been so distant. This was the ultimate mockery. To not only steal her husband, but to slander her fidelity, to attack the one pure thing she had left her child. You're implying I've been unfaithful? Josie asked. The question was a block of ice. I'm not implying anything, darling, Zara said, taking a casual step closer. She was acting for the crowd, playing the part of a concerned friend. I'm just saying, you've seemed so lonely, and Damien has been so busy, working with me. Late nights, early mornings. We've been practically inseparable, finalizing the Kestrel deal. A man that busy. Well, a woman gets needs. You are, Josie said, even more repulsive than I imagined. Zara laughed. Oh, stop being so puritanical, Josie. We're all adults. You got your storybook wedding. You got your trust fund. You're getting the heir. I'm getting the rest. The man. The power. The real Turner Empire. It seems like a fair trade to me. You think this is a trade? I know it is. Zara leaned in her voice, dropping back to a conspiratorial hiss, though everyone could still see her smug confidence. He's tired of you, Josie. He's tired of the good old money judgment. He's tired of your sad, pale face. He wants fire. He wants ambition. He wants someone who isn't afraid to get their hands dirty. Her eyes raked over Josie's body. And look at you. You're a vessel. You're the past. I'm the future. He's just waiting for the right time to get rid of the inconvenience. She gestured pointedly at Josie's stomach. The cruelty was breathtaking. It was designed to shatter her, to make her weep, to make her scream, to make her run from the ballroom in shame. That was the victory Zara wanted, a public abdication. Josie felt the baby kick a hard, sudden jolt, as if he too could feel the venom in the air. That kick, it centered her. It wasn't just her reputation on the line. It was her child's. You've thought this all through, haven't you? Josie said. Her voice was shaking, but not with fear. It was with a rage so cold it was close to absolute zero. From the moment I stepped into the boardroom, Zara admitted, her voice full of pride. I saw him, and I knew. He was trapped. By his mother, by his name, and then by you. I'm not stealing him, Josie. I'm liberating him. And the company? Are you liberating that too? Josie asked, her tone conversational. Zara's eyes narrowed just a fraction, a flicker of confusion. The company is the man, and I'm his best asset, the Kestrel deal. That's my masterpiece. It's going to double his net worth. I'm giving him the world. What are you giving him? A screaming, messy infant and a wife who's past her prime. You're so sure of yourself, Josie said. So sure of your masterpiece. So sure of him. Of course I am, Zara scoffed. He tells me everything. Unlike you, I'm his partner. He doesn't hide his late nights from me. I am his late nights. He's right over there, Josie said, nodding her head slightly. Why don't we ask him? Zara's smile was blinding. An excellent idea. She turned, her red dress swirling, and raised her hand. Damien, darling. Damien, who had been deep in conversation with Julian Rothschild, looked over. He saw Zara beaming and Josie pale and still, his brow furrowed. This was not the stability he'd asked for. He excused himself and crossed the ballroom. The whispers intensified. The king was approaching the dueling queens. What's going on? Damien asked, his voice low and tight. He looked at Josie. Is there a problem? Before Josie could speak, Zara slid her hand into the crook of Damien's arm, a gesture of shocking intimacy. She leaned her head against his shoulder, a perfect picture of a damsel in distress. Oh, Damien, I'm so glad you're here, Zara said, her voice suddenly trembling. I was just trying to congratulate Josie on the baby, and she flew at me. Josie stared, astonished at the audacity of the lie. What? Damien said, looking at Josie with disbelief. She accused me of the most awful things, Zara said, dabbing at a non-existent tear. She said I was trying to replace her. And then she said I was trash. Zara turned her face into his jacket as if hiding a sob. I was only trying to be nice, Damien. But she's so emotional. It must be the hormones. This was the move. To paint Josie as the hysterical, hormonal, jealous wife. Damien looked at Josie. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were cold. He was embarrassed. This was a scene. This was exactly what he'd warned her against. "Josie," he said, his voice a command. "Apologize to Zara, now." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Apologize to Zara. Josie looked at her husband, the man she had loved, or at least the man she had built a life with. He was standing there, his arm firmly around his mistress, who was pressing her face into his tuxedo, her body faking a delicate tremble, and he was looking at her, his pregnant wife, with pure, unadulterated annoyance. He believed the lie. Or more accurately, he chose to believe the lie because it was the fastest way to end the scene. The crowd was rapt. This was better than any Broadway play. The tycoon, the pregnant wife, the stunning VP. They were watching Josie, waiting for her to crumble. "Apologize," Josie repeated. Her voice was quiet, but it carried in the silence. "Yes." "Apologize," Damien snapped, his patience gone. "You are making a spectacle of yourself. Zara is my colleague. She is vital to this company. You will not treat her this way." "Vital," Josie said, tasting the word. "Damien, please," Zara murmured. "It's fine. She's just not herself. Maybe she should go home. Rest." It was the perfect kill with kindness line. She was dismissing Josie, sending the child wife to her bed. Damien nodded, seizing the lifeline. "She's right. You're clearly overwrought." "Markham," he called out, looking over the crowd for his head of security. "Markham, get the car. My wife is leaving." This was it, her lowest point. He wasn't just siding with the mistress. He was banishing his wife from their own event in front of everyone they knew, all to placate the woman he was sleeping with. He was sacrificing her and their child for the sake of his vital employee. The humiliation was a physical burn. She felt it on her cheeks, in her chest. She saw the pity in Senator Davenport's eyes. She saw the barely concealed smirk on Julian Rothschild's face. She was the fool, the cuckolded, pregnant, hysterical fool. "No," Josie said. Damien, who had started to turn away, froze. "What did you say, Sambour?" "I said no," Josie said. And this time her voice was different. The tremor was gone. It was replaced by the clear, cold steel precision of the lawyer she used to be, the one who could eviscerate a hostile witness without ever raising her voice. She took a step towards them. "I'm not going anywhere, and I will not apologize." "Josie, I am warning you." Damien hissed, his face darkening with rage. "Do not do this. Not here." "Oh, but this is the only place to do it," Josie said. She gave him a small, sad smile. "This is, after all, a night about transparency and charity, isn't it? Let's be transparent." She turned her gaze from her husband to the viper on his arm. "You're right, Zara," Josie said, her voice resonating through the ballroom. The string quartet had officially stopped playing. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning. "You are a masterpiece, a brilliant, ambitious, bold woman. You were right about everything. This marriage is a shell. Damien is bored, and he does want a partner who can build with him. Zara's face, which had been hidden, slowly emerged from Damien's jacket. Her expression was one of pure, unadulterated triumph. She thought this was a surrender. "But you made one tiny fatal mistake," Josie continued. "And what's that, darling?" Zara purred, her confidence restored. "Underestimating you." "Oh no," Josie said. "You didn't underestimate me. You underestimated him." She pointed at Damien. "You thought he was so blinded by, well, you, that he'd become a complete and utter fool. You thought the man who built a global empire from nothing wouldn't notice a $20 million rat chewing on his foundations." Damien's head snapped toward Josie. The color drained from his face. What are you talking about?" Zara's victorious smile faltered. It didn't disappear, but it froze at the edges. "Josie, you're rambling. You're hysterical. Damien, she's the Kestrel acquisition," Josie said, cutting her off. "Your masterpiece, the one you've been working on so closely. The one that's kept you and Damien in late-night sessions for months." "It's a brilliant deal," Zara said, her voice suddenly a half-octave higher. "Damien knows. It's going to make you very rich," Josie finished. "But not Turner Industries." She looked at Damien. "You know, for a shark, darling, you have a remarkable blind spot. You were so busy enjoying the perks of your VP, you never bothered to do your own due diligence." "Josie, enough," Damien commanded, but there was a new raw panic in his voice. "No, I don't think it is," Josie said. "Tell me, Damien, are you familiar with a shell corporation called Vance Holdings, registered in the Cayman Islands?" "Zara." Vance went white, not pale, not wan. It was the bloodless, stark white of terror. She's lying," Zara shrieked, her hand clutching Damien's arm. "She's making it up. She's a jealous, crazy—" "Am I?" Josie said. She reached into her small, elegant evening bag and pulled out her phone. "I was a corporate lawyer for 10 years, Damien. I specialized in forensic accounting and white-collar crime. While you were working with Zara, I was doing a little light reading, auditing her Kestrel files." She held up the phone. $20 million, siphoned from the acquisition fund, transferred in 3 separate wire payments to an offshore account. An account that, with a little help from my father's firm, I traced directly to Vance Holdings, sole proprietor house, Dara. The room was so quiet, Josie could hear the ice shifting in a glass 10 feet away. She's trying to frame me," Zara screamed. "Damien, she hates me. She hates me because you love me." Damien Turner looked at Zara. He looked at her, and it was as if he was seeing her for the first time. The affair. That was an asset. It was an ego boost. The theft that was a betrayal. It wasn't just a betrayal of his trust. It was an insult to his intelligence. He hated more than anything being played for a fool. "Is it true?" he asked Zara. His voice was no longer angry. It was dead. "No, Damien, baby, listen to me." "He doesn't have to listen to you," Josie said. "He can just read the email I sent 5 minutes ago, the one I sent to you, Damien, and to your mother, and to the entire board of Turner Industries. And just for good measure, to my contact at the SEC. That was the kill shot, the Securities and Exchange Commission." Zara Vance let go of Damien's arm. Her entire body had gone limp. The blood-red dress now looked like a shroud. You she stammered, looking at Josie. "You bitch." "Yes," Josie said, one hand on her stomach. "Now, as my husband was saying, I believe you were about to be leaving." The silence that followed Josie's words was absolute. It was a vacuum sucking all the air and warmth from the opulent ballroom. Every eye Senator Davenport's, Julian Rothschild's, Genevieve Turner's was fixed on the toxic triangle at the center of the room. Damien Turner hadn't moved. His face was a mask of cold fury. But it wasn't directed at Josie. It was directed at the woman who had just been exposed as a common thief. The affair was a misdemeanor. This was a capital crime. "The C," he finally said, his voice a low growl. "I had to be sure you'd take it seriously," Josie replied calmly. "You seemed distracted." This was the final twist of the knife. It wasn't just that Zara had stolen. It was that Josie had been the one to catch her. The wife he had dismissed as a fragile incubator, a social ornament, had just saved his company from a multi-million-dollar fraud and a PR nightmare with the SEC. She hadn't just outplayed the mistress. She had outplayed him. Zara, seeing the look on Damien's face, knew the game was over. The man was gone. The job was gone. Her life was over. She went from predator to prey in a single heartbeat. "No. No, Damien, please," she whimpered, reaching for him. "It was a mistake. It was a golden prosciutto. You told me you'd always protect me. You said I was your partner." Damien recoiled from her touch as if she were diseased. "You stole from me. I did it for us." Zara cried, her composure shattering into 1,000 pieces. "So we could have a future. So we wouldn't have to worry about her taking everything in a divorce." It was a desperate, pathetic lie, and everyone knew it. Damien Turner, tycoon, predator, and king, did not yell. He did not scream. He simply lifted his chin. His gaze moving past Josie, past Zara to the edge of the room. His voice was calm. "Markham." A large man in a perfectly tailored black suit detached himself from the wall. Markham was Damien's head of security, a former Secret Service agent who was paid a fortune to be invisible until he wasn't. He and 2 other men, also in dark suits, began to move through the crowd. They didn't run. They walked a slow, methodical, terrifying advance. The crowd parted for them like the Red Sea. Zara's eyes widened in terror. "Damien! No, you can't do this. Not here, Damien. I love you." "Damien." Turner turned his back on her. He turned his back and faced his wife. He looked at Josie, at her calm, steady expression, at the hand resting on their unborn son. His expression was unreadable. It was a maelstrom of rage, humiliation, and a new, terrifying flicker of respect. He had been played by both women, but only one of them had won. "Markham," Damien said again, his voice flat. "Ms. Vance is no longer an employee of this company. She is trespassing. Please escort her from the premises." "Damien, no!" Zara shrieked as Markham reached her. "Ms. Vance," Markham said, his voice as quiet and final as a closing vault. "Please come with us." "Get your hands off me," Zara screeched, batting at his arm. "Do you know who I am? You're a thief," Josie said, her voice cutting through Zara's hysteria. Zara lunged, not at Damien, but at Josie. It was a primal, desperate, animalistic move, her hands clawed, aiming for Josie's face. She never made it. Markham, with reflexes born of protecting politicians, moved faster than anyone thought possible. He didn't just block her. He caught her by the upper arms, his grip like a steel trap. Zara's momentum was stopped so fast, her head snapped back. "Don't touch her," Markham growled, and that was the end of Zara Vance. The two other security men grabbed her. This was no gentle escort. This was the title of the story made real. This was the mistress mocked the pregnant wife, but the tycoon's security dragged her out in front of everyone. They didn't just walk her out. They lifted her. Her designer heels, the ones she'd bought with Damien's stolen money, scraped uselessly against the marble floor. She was dragged. Right through the center of the Orion Grand Ballroom, past the champagne fountain, past Julian Rothschild, who watched with undisguised fascination, past Senator Davenport, who looked away as if embarrassed, past Genevieve Turner, who watched with a look of cold, grim satisfaction. Zara's screams echoed off the high, frescoed ceilings. "You'll regret this, Damien. You need me, Josie. You barren bitch. I'll kill you both." Her blood-red dress twisted and hitched up her thigh. Her hair, once so sleek, was a frantic mess. She was no longer a shark. She was chum. They dragged her through the grand lobby, past the stunned coat-check girls, and out into the flashing cameras of the paparazzi, who, sensing blood in the water, had surged toward the entrance. Her final screaming curses were cut off as the heavy oak doors of the ballroom swung shut, plunging the room back into a heavy tomb-like silence. The silence that Zara left behind was louder than her screams. The string quartet remained motionless, their bows hovering over their instruments. Hundreds of pairs of eyes, which had followed Zara's humiliating exit, now snapped back to the two people left standing in the center of the floor, Damien and Josie Turner. Josie stood poised and still, her hand never leaving her stomach. She hadn't flinched. She hadn't cried. She had simply watched. Damien stared at the doors, his chest rising and falling. His public face was a mask of iron, but Josie could see the muscle twitching in his jaw. He was a man who had just had his kingdom saved, and his ego shattered in the same breath by the same person. He turned to her. The room held its collective breath. What would the king do to the queen who had just checkmated him in public? "You," he began, his voice a strained whisper. "You sent it to the SEC." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. She hadn't just handled a family problem. She had exposed his company to federal oversight. "Yes," Josie said clearly, for him and for the listening ears of the board members nearby. "Corporate fraud is a serious crime, Damien. I assumed you'd want to be fully compliant with the law. As a majority shareholder, I certainly did." She had just reminded him and everyone that she wasn't just his wife. Through her family trust and her prenuptial agreement, she was a shareholder. She had a stake. You humiliated me," he hissed. "You let this thief make a fool of me in my own company for months. You let me make a fool of myself tonight in front of everyone." "Did I?" Josie asked. "Or did you?" She finally took a step toward him, closing the distance. She looked up into his cold, furious eyes. "The mockery wasn't that she thought the baby wasn't yours, Damien," she said, her voice devastatingly quiet. "The mockery was that she thought you were so blinded by your own ego that you wouldn't notice $20 million was missing. And she was right. She paused, letting the truth of it land. You didn't notice, I did. She held his gaze, and for the first time, Damien Turner looked away. He had no response. She had told the truth. He, the great tycoon, had been so busy with the perks of his affair that he had missed a massive embezzlement happening right under his nose. His wife, the one he'd sidelined and ignored, had been the only one minding the store. Josie looked around the room. The guests were frozen. The party was dead. She did not wait for him to dismiss her. She did not wait for his permission. She turned from her husband and began to walk. She didn't walk toward the exit. She walked with slow, regal purpose toward the head table. The table where she was supposed to be seated. She walked past his mother, Genevieve, who looked at Josie with a new, sharp and terrifying approval. Josie reached the table, picked up her own untouched glass of water, and took a sip. She turned to the stunned crowd. "Please," she said, her voice projecting with the calm authority of the building's true owner. "Don't let a small personnel issue ruin this wonderful evening. The Foundation's work is too important." She then turned to the leader of the string quartet. "Maestro. Vivaldi, I believe. Please continue." The maestro, stunned, nodded. He raised his bow, and the music, shaky at first, began to fill the silence. It was the ultimate power move. She hadn't just won. She had taken control. She had fired the mistress, neutered her husband, and restarted her own party in the span of 10 minutes. Damien Turner was left standing alone in the middle of the floor, the whispers now following him. He was the fool, the one who had been played. Slowly, his fists unclenching, he composed his face. He smoothed his tuxedo. He was a tycoon, and the show must go on. He walked to the head table and sat down, not next to his wife, but 2 chairs down. They sat there for the rest of the gala, separated by an icy chasm of exposed lies and cold, hard numbers. They were the perfect, powerful couple smiling for the cameras. But the room knew. The world would know by morning. Zara Vance was just the opening act. The real fall was that of Damien Turner's infallible image. And the rise, cold and brilliant as the diamond on her finger, was that of Josie Turner. The drive home to the penthouse was a study in pressurized silence. The interior of the Rolls-Royce, usually a cocoon of quiet luxury, felt like a decompression chamber on the verge of catastrophic failure. The city blurred past the tinted windows, the vibrant lights of New York fracturing like shattered jewels through Josie's tired eyes. She was exhausted, the adrenaline of the confrontation draining away, leaving behind the profound, bone-deep weariness of her pregnancy and the hollow ache of her victory. Beside her, Damien was a statue carved from ice. He didn't speak. He didn't look at her. He just stared straight ahead, his hands fisted on his knees, his entire being vibrating with a rage so profound it was for now silent. Josie could feel the heat of his humiliation radiating from him. The only sound was the almost imperceptible click of the turn signal as their driver, oblivious to the nuclear bomb that had detonated in the ballroom, navigated the familiar route home. The elevator ride up to the penthouse was the final agonizing ascent. The mirrored walls reflected the 2 of them, the conquering queen weary and heavy with child, and the deposed king, his armor of arrogance rent in 2. The soft ding, as the doors opened to their private lobby, was deafening. Damien strode into the marble entryway. He didn't wait for her, nor did he help her with her wrap. He went straight to the minimalist glass bar, his movements stiff and economical. The sharp, scraping sound of the crystal decanter stopper being pulled was an act of violence. The glug, glug, glug of the 18-year-old scotch filling his glass was an accusation. Josie didn't follow. She kicked off her heels, the small human act of surrender to her aching feet. She walked past him, her hand on her stomach, and went to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Central Park. The view, which had once felt like a cage, now just looked distant. A map of a life that no longer belonged to her. She waited. She had won the public war. This was the private, unconditional surrender. Damien downed the first glass in 2 swallows, the burn in his throat a welcome distraction from the fire in his gut. He poured a second, his hand shaking slightly. He was replaying the night. The SEC. His mother's face, that terrible look of cold, calculating approval directed at Josie. The undisguised pity from Julian Rothschild. The smirks. He was Damien Turner. He was not a man to be pitied. He was not a fool. And yet, "You knew for months," he finally said, his voice a low, rough growl. Josie didn't turn. "Yes. You knew. You sat at my table. You let me talk about our son. You slept in my bed, all while you were sharpening the knife." "I was gathering data," she replied, her voice reflecting off the cold glass. "Gathering data," he roared, spinning to face her. "Is that what you call it? You were building a case like I was some hostile target. You were," she said. And now she turned her eyes as clear and hard as the diamonds at her throat. "The moment you brought a predator into your bed, you became a liability to your own company. And as a shareholder, I had a fiduciary duty to protect my investment. And my son's. My God," he whispered, a look of genuine shock on his face. "Your investment? Was that all it ever was? This marriage, this child?" "This marriage," Josie said, taking a step toward him, "was a partnership, a sacred trust, and you violated it. You voided every clause the moment you decided my use was finished. You wanted a builder. Zara was right. I am a builder. I just spent the last 3 months building a cage for her, and a very different one for you." He stared at her, the bravado draining away, leaving behind a hollowed-out, defeated man. "What did you want Josie to humiliate me, to destroy me?" "I wanted to survive," she shot back, the first tremor of her own agony, breaking through the ice. "You, the great man, were so blinded by your own ego, so desperate for a younger, hotter version of the shark you used to be, that you were handing your kingdom, our son's kingdom, to a common con artist. You didn't notice $20 million was missing, Damien. You were too busy." "So I did." He flinched. That was the truth that stung more than the infidelity. The insult to his intelligence. He had been played. She said," he stammered, looking for any weapon he could find. "The baby, is it?" And Josie's face didn't just harden. It collapsed into a mask of pure, devastating scorn. She physically recoiled, one hand flying to her chest as if he had struck her. "Don't you dare!" She whispered the words, trembling with a rage that eclipsed his own. "Don't you dare for 1 second try to use her poison as your shield, that you would even let that filth into your head, that you would repeat it to me now. It proves you never knew me at all. It proves you are a weaker, more pathetic man than even I thought." He had the grace to look shattered. The last of his anger vanished, replaced by a grey, desolate shame. "Josie, I'm sorry." "You're sorry you got caught," she said instantly, her voice flat and devoid of all emotion. "You're sorry you looked stupid. You're sorry she insulted your intelligence. You're sorry you lost $20 million. You are not sorry for the affair. You are only sorry for the consequences." He couldn't answer. He just stared into his glass, because she was right. "I want a divorce, Damien," she said, the words landing in the quiet room with the finality of a gavel. "A quiet one. An amicable split for the papers. We can blame irreconcilable differences. We will share custody of our son. But you and I, we are finished." He looked up, panic dawning in his eyes. This was not the script. He was supposed to be angry. She was supposed to be weeping. He was supposed to fix this. "Josie, wait," he said, setting his glass down, taking a step toward her. We can fix this. The company. My God, Josie, I need you. You saved it. Genevieve, my mother, she called you brilliant. She wants you on the board. She wants you to take Zara's place." Josie let out a short, bitter laugh that was half a sob. "Of course she does. I just saved her fortune. She doesn't care who you're sleeping with, Damien, as long as the stock price is stable, but no." "No," he repeated, dumbfounded. "I'm not interested in being your partner, Damien. I'm not interested in cleaning up your messes. I saved my assets, and my son's. The company was just the battlefield. I am not going to spend the rest of my life watching your back, waiting for the next Zara to come along and blind you with flattery. I'm taking my shares, my son, and my name, and I'm leaving." She started to walk past him toward their bedroom. "Josie," he called out, his voice raw with a desperation she had never heard from him. "Wait, please don't I get a second chance?" She stopped at the doorway, her back to him. She rested her forehead against the cool wood for just a moment, gathering the very last of her strength. "Damien," she said without turning, "you don't get to cheat and be stupid. I might have been able to forgive one in time, but I can't forgive both." She walked into the bedroom and closed the door, the soft, decisive click of the latch, the only sound. Four months later, the air in the apartment was warm, filled with the scent of lemon oil, fresh laundry, and sweet, milky baby powder. Sunlight streamed through the large bay windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing over the overflowing bookshelves and the old, polished hardwood floors. Josie Hayes, she had taken her maiden name back with a vengeance, rocked gently in a comfortable overstuffed armchair, humming as she finished buttoning her son's sleeper. In her arms, Thomas Hayes Turner, 6 weeks old and perfectly healthy, yawned and stretched. Her new apartment on the Upper West Side was a world away from the penthouse. It wasn't a showplace. It was a home. The divorce had been swift and surgically clean. As Josie had predicted, Genevieve Turner, ever the pragmatist, had stepped in. It was not a settlement. It was a transaction. Josie traded her silence, and all her Turner shares that had doubled in value after she'd prevented the Kestrel disaster, for a cash buyout that was by any standard astronomical. Genevieve had fought to secure the dynasty, a silent acknowledgement from one matriarch to another that Josie had won. As for Zara Vance, her fall had been as swift as it was brutal. Indicted on 2 counts of wire fraud and 1 of corporate embezzlement, her face had been plastered across the Post and the Journal. Facing a minimum of 15 years, her high-priced Turner-funded lawyers had dropped her the day after the gala. Josie's legal team had informed her that Zara, friendless and bankrupt, was expected to take whatever plea the U.S. attorney offered. Josie pushed Thomas's stroller through the crisp January air of Central Park. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. She felt light. She heard the footsteps on the gravel path behind her. Expensive leather-soled shoes, steady and hesitant. She didn't have to turn. Josie. She stopped and turned. Damien stood a few feet away. He looked smaller somehow. Thinner. He wasn't wearing his usual armor of a bespoke suit, just a simple dark overcoat and scarf. "Hello, Damien." His eyes went immediately to the stroller. "He looks healthy. Big." "He is," Josie said, her voice neutral. "He's a good eater." I brought him something," Damien said, awkwardly. He held out a small, iconic light blue bag. From it, he pulled a small, ridiculously expensive-looking silver rattle from Tiffany's. It was a beautiful, impersonal, and predictable gift. It was his language. Josie looked at the rattle, then at him. "It's lovely. You can give it to him on Saturday, Damien. It's your visitation day. 2 o'clock, remember. My nanny will have him ready." The words, though polite, were a clear boundary. He was not family. He was a co-parent with a schedule. "Right. Saturday," he said, lowering his hand, looking lost. He cleared his throat. "The company. It's stable. The SEC investigation was contained. Your data was meticulous. They're satisfied." "Good," she said, preparing to turn the stroller. "Josie, wait. I'm in therapy." That made her pause. She looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw the weariness around his eyes. It was the first truly human thing he had said to her in almost a year. "Good for you, Damien," she said, and she meant it. "I hope it helps." "It is," he said, taking a half step closer. "It's making me see a lot of things. About my mother. About me. I was wondering if we, after some time, could find a way back." Josie held up a hand, and he stopped. "No," she said, but it was not unkind. "I'm glad you're getting help, Damien. I truly am. For your own sake. And for Thomas's. He deserves a father who is present and whole. But I am not a project for you to win back. I'm not an acquisition. I'm done." He nodded, the old tycoon's pride flashing for a second. He hated losing. You really despise me, don't you? After all this?" Josie thought for a long, quiet moment. She looked at her sleeping son, his perfect, tiny face, serene, the only good and pure thing to come from the wreckage. She looked back at the man, who was now essentially a stranger. "No, Damien," she said, and it was the absolute honest truth. "I don't despise you." She pushed a stray wisp of hair from her face, her eyes meeting his. "I just don't think about you. At all." She turned the stroller. The quiet whir of the wheels on the path was the only sound. She walked away, not looking back, pushing her son toward the patch of bright sunlight ahead, leaving her former husband standing alone, a useless silver rattle in his hand, in the deep, cold shade of the winter trees. And that was the fall of Zara Vance and the rise of Josie Turner. Josie proved that the sharpest weapon isn't always volume, but intelligence. She didn't just get mad. She got everything. What did you think of Josie's revenge? Was it too cold, or was it the perfect response to a double betrayal? She lost her husband, but she gained her freedom, her self-respect, and a new life for her son. Let us know in the comments what you would have done in her position. If you loved this story of drama and consequences, make sure to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see a true power move, and of course, subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories every single week. You won't want to miss what we have coming next.